Hello, and welcome. It's Dr. Barry here again for another exciting episode of the Health and Wellness Connection podcast. Now, of course, we're broadcasting live on the usual suspects, AfroVibesRadio.com. If you haven't, please stop what you're doing, download the app this instant, and enjoy live streaming of some of the hottest Afrobeat DJs in America, and the world, actually, I should say, as well as some exciting programming, including the Health and Wellness podcast. If you don't want to download the app because your phone's out of memory or something, you can always go to the website and stream from the browser as well at AfroVibesRadio.com. And of course, we also are on SoundCloud.com. You check us out. All the new shows are posted as they broadcast here on AfroVibesRadio.com. Check us out at www.soundcloud.com/HW Connection, all one word. Now, of course, I am your illustrious host, Dr. Barry. Check me out on Instagram at the address at Dr. Barry MD. That's at DRBARYMD. And of course, my other sites include my blog, which is www.controlyourweight8.com, and of course, Facebook. Our Facebook home is www.facebook.com/nextlevelweightloss. Now, excuse the lengthy intro, but I want to thank you again for bearing with us and tuning in for another exciting episode. Now, today's episode is going to be pretty apropos. Of course, in this time of year, it's summer, so things are extremely hot. And this show today is going to be about how to stay cool during the hot summer months. Now, for those who are not in the United States, there's a pretty strong heat wave going on in the U.S. currently. Temperatures are pretty much soaring throughout the entire country. Some people say that it's one of the greatest heat wave on record for this 4th of July that we're currently celebrating in America. Now, the thing about heat waves is that heat waves can be extremely dangerous if you're not careful in navigating properly. Now, for my people over in Nigeria who are listening, you guys are probably used to heat waves on a regular basis, but it's still something that you guys can definitely take into account as well, as far as some of the tips we're going to give out today regarding how to stay cool during the hot summer period. Now, this is going to be kind of we're going to bounce around different areas we're going to focus on as far as different topics and different ways to stay cool. And so, we'll just kind of start with the simple things. Now, the main thing you should obviously do is, if you can, stay out of the heat. Now, of course, that's easier said than done, especially if you're an outdoor worker and you're laborer, so this may not apply to you. But if you're someone who can, avoid being out in direct heat for extended periods, it's probably the best move. Meaning, you're someone who's, wakes up in the morning in your air-conditioned house, you jump in your air-conditioned car, drive to your air-conditioned indoor location, you probably won't have much issue dealing with the heat. Now, if you're someone who is, not an indoor person, you work outdoors, or you like to physically work out and you like to work out at noon, you're probably going to need to change some of those habits. Meaning, to avoid those external exposure to extended heat, you may want to consider working out in the evening or working out in the morning, or try to limit your outdoor activity to the times when the heat is not as intense, usually in the morning or the evening. So that's something you can definitely do as someone who's trying to reduce heat exposure and reduce the risk of heat stroke. So try to avoid, extended exposure in the high noon or the hottest periods of the day, because those kind of periods are the times when people are more likely to develop conditions like heat stroke and dehydration. And before we go too much further, let's talk a bit about heat stroke, because that is something that we see a lot, especially in the emergency room. Now, my night job is I am an ER doctor, so I see a lot of people here for a lot of emergency conditions, and the summertime is a really notorious period for people suffering from heat stroke. Now, heat stroke is a condition that's caused typically by your body overheating. Now, this usually occurs as a result of prolonged exposure to physical exertion and high temperatures, hence the reason why we stress kind of avoiding prolonged exposure if you can. Now, heat stroke can be very serious. I mean, people usually attribute heat stroke to just passing out in the sun, quote unquote, or getting a little dehydrated and kind of falling out. But if not taken care of, if not really treated properly, it can really damage your brain, kidneys, muscles, and your heart. So you want to be very careful when you're really exerting yourself in high, intense heat, that you're doing things to keep yourself cool and minimizing potential risk and damage to yourself. Now, before we go a little further, I want to make sure we really understand heat stroke, the dangers of excessive heat exposure. Things you will notice with heat stroke, you have typically high body temperatures. You may become confused or altered. You may start, instead of sweating intensely like you would normally do during a typical period of feeling heat, you may actually get very dry. And this usually is due to a malfunction of the sweat glands, which can happen when you're in a period of high stress, which can happen when you're overheated. You may get nauseous, you may get flushed, you may have excessively elevated heart rate. So these are things you want to be very careful about when you're outdoors. So again, this podcast is going to hopefully help reduce the risk of you developing this by kind of following some of these tips. So we've talked about trying to avoid outdoor direct exposure to prolonged sun, especially if you're doing strenuous activities like working out. That should be pretty obvious. Now, the second thing people also want to keep in mind is that you want to wear loose-fitting clothing, preferably of something of a light color, like white or yellow, something bright and light. You want to avoid dark colors during the summer, namely because dark colors absorb heat better, so you actually retain heat, which could potentially increase your risk of heat overexposure. Now, the clothing is actually, the color and the fitting is only part of it. You want to also make sure the material is also appropriate. Cotton clothing is usually ideal, or the clothing that tends to have the sweat-proof material that can help reduce heavy, soggy clothing that can potentially also be a potential way that heat can be trapped on your body, which is obviously something you want to avoid during periods of intense heat. So, it's very important that when you're outdoors and you're really exposed, you have a lot of, intense temperature of variations. You do what you can. And keeping your clothing loose, cool, and light color is something that can definitely help. Another thing you could do if you're trying to stay cool, try filling up a spray bottle with water and keeping it in the refrigerator or somewhere in a cool environment. And then you can spray yourself in the face after being outdoors for a little bit. This is a good way to cool off quickly, as cool liquid is a little bit more effective in cooling than cool air. And we know this because actually if you come into the ER with heat stroke type symptoms, one of the ways we can cool people down quickly is by putting ice packs underneath the armpits and in the groin, and as well as giving cool liquid through the IV or cooler liquid through the IV to help cool the internal organs faster. Now, of course, that's a little more aggressive than simply spraying cool water on your face, but the idea is that the cool liquids can transmit, or in this case, remove heat faster from the body, allowing the heat to escape the system, allowing the internal body temperature to cool off quicker. So cool water, especially misted, is a little more effective in helping cool people than simply cool air. Now, speaking of air is also quite important as well. So when you have, air, you want to make sure it's circulating effectively in the area that you're at, especially if you're indoors or if you're in a situation where ventilation may not be ideal, or it's too ideal in the sense that too much of the cool air is escaping into the hot area. Having air circulating around the individual can also help reduce temperatures, as it can help allow the body to release heat more effectively. So try to make sure you keep the fans on in addition to the ACs to help move air around, which can help you feel cooler even in an air-conditioned house. And so being cool is very important, and cool air and cool mists are all effective ways to stay cool and try to maintain a more effective lower temperature in the hot months. Now, of course, staying cool is only part of the equation. You want to make sure you you not only change your external environment, you want to optimize your internal environment as well by doing the right things to keep your body properly equipped to deal with the heat. We'll talk more about how you can do that in the next part of the show as we come up to the break, but staying cool is definitely something you have to work at. It's very difficult during the hot months sometimes to really relax and stay cool, but a lot of things you can do, and we're going to help you, do some of those things, as well as give you some additional tips on ways you can avoid the dangers of heat exhaustion during these hot summer months. So again, stick with us. We'll be back right after the break. Now, another thing you can do actually before, as far as staying cool, in the summer months, try actually keeping plastic bottles of water in the freezer, right? And you grab one when you're about to go outside so that, when you have this kind of frozen bottle of water and it's extremely hot outside, over time, the heat will obviously melt that bottle of water, which will essentially give you a cool supply of water to take throughout the day. Now, another thing you could do too, if you're lucky enough to live near a convenience store that sells those very effective cooler cups that can actually keep items or water cold for up to 24 hours, that's probably a good investment as well. The popular name brand, I think, are the Yeti and the Arctic. If you get one of those things can actually keep beverages cold and or hot for that matter for up to 12 to 24 hours. So there's something also you can fill up and keep with you throughout the day so you can have cool water to drink to help reduce the risk of dehydration. Now, speaking of water, that's actually something that's very important we should probably touch on a bit. How much water to drink? Now, normally, I think the common adage that a lot of people use, or a lot of publications promote, is the concept of drinking 8 ounce glass of water a day. Now, that's a normal amount for someone who's relatively sedentary, not that active, and of course not being exposed to extreme temperatures. Now, during the hot summer months, you want to definitely increase that. Most people are recommending now about 10 to 12 8-ounce glasses a day. If you're someone who's working out or doing extraneous activity in the heat, you want to maybe even go higher than that. Maybe 14 8-ounce glasses a day, 16. Some people even advocate drinking up to a gallon a day, but that's not been scientifically proven to be that much more effective than 12 8-ounce glasses. But there are people who swear by it, and they are doing pretty well, especially in the fitness community. So drinking a lot of water is going to be very important, especially in the hot summer months, because of the increased requirements of your body and the increased water loss when you're outdoors sweating profusely trying to stay cool during the hot summer months. So drinking water is critical, either if you keep it in a plastic bottle and keep it around, or have a large insulation cup that you keep around with you that'll help keep your beverage cool. But either way, you want to continue drinking to help reduce the risk of overheating and heat stroke, which is the big danger when it comes to sun exposure. Alrighty, so again, thanks for listening to the first half of the show. On the second half of the show, we're going to talk more about some ways to stay cool, as well as some other things you should look out for during the summer months, some other tips and tricks you can use to avoid getting sick. In addition to staying cool, you want to stay healthy too. So we'll talk more about those after the break. Thanks for tuning in. Hello, and welcome. It's Dr. Barry, and thanks for coming back to joining us today on this awesome show. We're talking about some of the ways to stay cool during these hot summer months. Now, at the end of the last break, we talked about drinking water and why it's so important. One thing I failed to mention, was you don't want to drink just plain water. When you hydrate, you want to make sure the fluid you're drinking has electrolytes, because that is actually how your body rehydrates your organs. Electrolytes like sodium, potassium are very important as far as how the water moves in the system to get water to your different parts of the body, especially at the cellular level. So it's very important that when you do hydrate, you drink fluids that have electrolytes. Now, historically, popular sports drinks like Gatorade and Powerade have been the kind of the go-to choices, especially for athletes, because they have a lot of sugar, which is very important. As we talked about last show, sugar is a very important energy source. Now, if you're about to go work out, then having a sports drink with sugar in addition to electrolytes is going to be ideal, because you'll get the energy boost as well as the electrolytes, which will help your body hydrate more efficiently. However, if you're just kind of sedentary, or you're just doing some, you're just hanging out, not doing too much strenuous activity, all that excess of sugar may not be ideal. So in those kind of situations, drinking fluids that do have electrolytes but without the sugar would be best. Some of those smart waters or electrolyte laden water preparations are some of the better choices. Sometimes the other drinks that have low sugar content are also ideal. So focus on hydrating with fluids that have electrolytes in them. That's especially effective when you're replacing fluids that you lose via sweating. So it's very important that if you're outdoors and you're sweating heavily, you're drinking a lot of fluids, so you can help reduce those fluids you're losing just by being outside. And it's so important you do that, because when you don't properly rehydrate, especially when you're outdoors, you definitely increase the risk of negative consequences occurring, like heat stroke and passing out, and potential kidney, heart, and brain damage. So hydration is very important, especially in the summer months. Actually, a funny story. I was talking one day. I was traveling actually in Nigeria, if I recall, and I remember it being very hot, and we were just kind of hanging out and stuff. And I remember a friend of mine was with me who said, it was sweating and really hot. And me, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's hot as well, so I'm drinking and trying to stay hydrated. And he asked me, so why are you drinking so much water? Do you want to continue to sweat? Now, funny story. One thing people know about me is that when it gets hot, I can sweat pretty easily. But I attribute that to me being always well hydrated. So, but sweating is something that can happen when you get very hot. And now, some people who don't like to sweat sometimes will not drink anything because they don't want their body to sweat excessively. That, I can tell you, is a bad idea, only because if you're not drinking fluids and you're outdoors in the extreme heat, you definitely increase the risk of dehydration occurring, which can definitely cause serious damage, including kidney damage. So you definitely want to just try to stay cool, but you don't want to potentially harm yourself by getting dehydrated just to avoid sweating, which is not a good way to handle that. Ultimately, if you're in an environment for a long period of time, your body will get acclimated to the environment, so you won't be sweating as much if you're in an environment for a period, as your body gets used to existing in that environment and under those conditions. All right, so in the moral of the story, drink more fluids. Can't stress that enough. Now, another thing that's, or another good way to stay cool during hot summer months, try taking frequent baths or showers with cool or tepid water. Now, again, we talked about how cool water is an effective conductor of heat, meaning that if cool water touches your skin, heat can leave the body easier, as that cool water is a better conductor of heat than simply air. So cool baths are very effective, especially if you don't have access to air conditioning, or you have dysfunctional cooling methods currently. A cool bath is a great way to cool off and reduce the risk of overheating if you don't have access to air-conditioned environments. Now, one thing that sometimes some people do like to use is trying to actually use one of those small portable battery-powered fans. Again, we talked about cool air and how it's an effective way to, help the body remove excess heat. So having a cool fan with a little mist, if you have a cool water mist you can spray and use a fan, that's a great way to cool off. So don't underestimate the power of those cool little mobile air fans and spray bottles to help regulate your temperature, because the worst thing you could do is ignore those signs that you may be experiencing when you're out and about and then collapse somewhere. We see those quite a bit in the emergency room, with people kind of not really realizing how overheated they are until it's too late. Because when you're on the floor and you're looking out into the sky and you're surrounded by a crowd of people because you just passed out, then you'll realize, you know what, I probably should have drank some more of that fluid that was being offered to me earlier. So don't be a victim if you can avoid it. Now, this is especially true if you're on medication, because there are some medications out here that can increase your risk of dehydration as well as heat stroke, especially those patients who are on diuretics, medications that make you urinate more. Those are people who are especially at risk. So if you're on a diuretic preparation like Lasix or Bumax or some of these medications that are designed for you to pee more, you especially want to be careful that you don't stay outdoors too long in the hot sun, as you have an increased risk of getting dehydrated and passing out. All right. So now, one thing about people who always talk to me regarding the summer, one of the biggest things that people have issue with is those, let's say, on fixed income and they have trouble paying those high air conditioning bills. Now, a lot of times, people, have various issues going on and they can't really meet all their recommendations. And unfortunately, the AC and the light bill may get neglected. Now, this can be very dangerous in the summer months, as without AC, especially in the United States where homes are constructed with central air in mind in the South, it can be, and they're insulated as a result. So it's very, possible that homes turn into literally virtual ovens, as these insulated homes just retain heat and become very, very dangerous. We know this is the case because every summer there's always a few reports of elderly people being found dead in their homes as a result of heat exhaustion because the AC broke, and family and friends who were, I guess, far away had no idea, and the elderly grandma or grandpa who didn't want to be a bother, so they don't want to call their family letting them know about issues regarding keep up with the bills, and unfortunately this results in people not being able to keep up with their electricity bills, causing these extremely unfortunate accidents to occur as people are unable to cool their homes properly, and then they end up having heat exhaustion and heat strokes in their homes. So there's been some movements to help people get fans and other kind of ways they can get cooling at the house. But one of the best ways, actually, is to get out of the house and maybe consider going to a public area like a shopping mall or a library or a movie theater, or a public space where, there's commercial entities making sure the AC is functioning. So if you're in a house, let's say you're living in a home and the AC is not working properly, maybe during the peak hours, like between, the afternoon, you're out maybe heading to the mall or maybe going to the library or somewhere that you can sit and chill until the evening time, when typically the cooler temperatures will allow those homes without AC to be more bearable. So it's very important that you try to put yourself in positions that'll allow you to avoid being exposed to extreme temperatures for a prolonged period of time. Now, another thing that you should probably consider, even though it may not be the most popular tip, is to try and avoid caffeine and alcohol. Now, unfortunately, these two, while very important for various reasons, both of these actually promote dehydration. Funny enough, both of these are actually diuretics. They make you go, not as strong as some of these other medications, but both of these substances, both alcohol and caffeine, promote urination, which can promote dehydration. So if you're drinking heavily and you're outdoors, you're definitely at an increased risk of having a potential episode of dehydration just due to the excessive water loss. So just keep that in mind when you're outdoors getting plastered in the hot sun. That's a prime way to potentially overheat and potentially collapse. And lastly, speaking of drinking in the hot sun, also be wary of hot tubs in the hot sun. Now, this is not something that you see that often, but I did have a patient one time who had been partying all day in the heat, and then they decided to jump in the hot tub in the evening. By that time, they had been drinking, and ultimately he ended up blacking out as a result because he was very dehydrated and overheated. And the hot tub didn't help, as his blood vessels vasodilated in the heat, and he ended up having we call a sinkable episode. So just be careful when you're outdoors partying in the heat and drinking. Those are all potential risk factors for blacking out and having a heat exhaustion type event. So in a nutshell, summer is a very unique time of the year. A lot of fun, a lot of cool activities going on, a lot of outdoor activities going on. So just keep some of these tips in mind so that you can have a safe and happy holidays. For those in the United States, have a happy 4th of July. Everyone else, have a happy July, and hopefully you're have an exciting time with your friends and family. Again, thanks for tuning in to the HWC podcast, Health and Wellness Connection. Appreciate you supporting us and being steadfast listeners. Any questions or concerns, please reach out to us. I am at Instagram, my address at DrBarryMD. Of course, you can find us at controlyourweight.com, Facebook, nextlevelweightloss.com, and just overall, we're everywhere. Just hit us up. Any questions, concerns, please feel free to reach out. Thanks for listening. Peace and love.